Mehdi. I'm with Richex, and today we're welcoming two special guests for this exclusive uh, live that is going to be about hiring, about also generally speaking the future of workspace, because we see that this is a topic that's getting a lot of tractions right now with different startups, different scale ups, and so I'm super excited to have two guests today. So we have Raphael, who is the CEO and founder at Richex. Raphael, hello.
Hi, Mehdi. How are you?
Yes, I'm great. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. And Brandon Silver, who is the co-founder and CEO at Payroll. Hi, Brandon.
Hey, Mehdi. Hi, Raphael. Thanks for having me today.
Exciting stuff. So yeah, a big thank you for joining for both of you. And so we'll kick off with I mean, I was saying quickly, during the introduction that um, this notion of distributed workplace has been really gaining a lot of traction these days, especially with pandemic. Pandemic has accelerated that as well. And I wanted to actually start off with a question to you, Rafael, to understand a little bit, from what you see within Richex as well, and what you see globally speaking from a macro perspective, the trends, in the talent market. Where is the market going these days?
Sure. Thanks, Mehdi, for organizing the event with the payroll team and the Rechex team. It's really great to be here. So, look, to answer your question, we see really different trends going on right now. We're still in this post-pandemic phase where a lot of companies are facing challenges to bring their employees back to the workplace. On the other hand, there's companies that are really embracing remote working when they can. Not everybody can. Uh, and then there's this other trend where we see a pretty strong shortage of talent in specific segments around sales, SDR, but also tech. And then in the background, and that's I would say the extra complexity. The macro is becoming a little bit more complicated with inflation and growth slowing down. So I think we're heading for maybe some more complicated months in the coming few weeks and months. So it's a bit of a mixed picture with this big change in behavior.
Okay, that's super cool. And do you think that from this perspective as well, if we have to think really kind of like broadly about um, people who are, and I've seen a lot of like discussion going on right now, especially for example like Y Combinator, who is apparently advising as well like their startups to go and to be also mindful of the different steps to carry on in the next months, because there will be probably some kind of rough month in front of us. Do you see, especially for companies who are like hiring right now, before a fundraise, do you think that this is something that is important, and why would that be important for them, Rafael, to kind of like push the hiring before a fundraise?
Look, I think when you're preparing for a fundraise, generally the biggest buckets for the use of funds are the sales and marketing and the tech. That's really the two big buckets. Unless you're very deep in engineering or
Yeah.
infrastructure, that's typically what we see at least. And so it's really important to have metrics to support those investments. And obviously, you also have to take into account that it will take some time to hire and to train those people. So you need to start planning really ahead of your fundraising, and almost start interviewing ahead of your fundraising to validate that, one, the talent is available, and that the metrics you're basing your model on are going to work, right? Both in terms of cost and in terms of the results you're trying to drive. I think the other point I would like to highlight is that internationalization is more important. And so, especially when you get into Series B and C and so on, generally you're starting to do market entry in other markets, and that also requires some planning, just to figure out the legislation, the rules, the culture. It's not always straightforward. So that's something you need to prepare for. You cannot just open an office in 2 minutes without any preparation.
And I wanted to as well, like, kind of ask you about something that usually, would kind of like be a point, to discuss with investors as well. Investors, when they speak to a startup, they want to really kind of understand where is going to be the hiring plan, etc. And I want to ask you really a question about like, what are for you, and I've with Richex you help companies and scale ups fundraise. So put them in contact with investors as well. What are the few concerns that you see investors are actually having when they discuss about like hiring plans?
Well, I think the investors are well aware about the difficulty to hire top talent. Everybody there's talent war, and the more specific the skill set, if you're looking for people in AI or blockchain, obviously there's high demand for those individuals. So that's generally concern number one. How are you going to attract those people? The second concern is speed of execution. Your plan is built almost on monthly or quarterly projections. But if you are going to take 1 or 2 quarters to hire the people you need, obviously everything is moved also with those hires. So those are the two main concerns. The last one, which is obviously the direct result of this, is the cost associated with hiring, which tends to go up in those circumstances.
Yeah, and Brandon, do you want to add up anything into that?
Well, maybe I think Raphael covered the points very well, but one of the other things we're seeing is just making sure that the roles that companies are hiring for are supported by the company strategy. So it's important to hire roles that are consistent with the specific needs in the business. I think there's often concern about cost considerations with rapidly scaling businesses, and also the longevity and the viability of those roles that they're bringing into the business. So they often come at great cost and great time and resource to get these people in, and just making sure that there is a plan, to integrate them into the culture and to make sure that the cost that startups and scale ups are spending, that there's longevity in these hires. Particularly, I think those are the concerns we're seeing mostly.
Yeah. Speaking of costs, by the way, Brandon, how do you manage basically hiring costs? Because the salaries are different, obviously, from a country to another. Wages are different. Also like from a cultural perspective, some companies you would have packages with different stuff, etc. How do you manage really hiring costs?
I think the first element that every business needs to understand is planning. I think, and Raphael mentioned it earlier, you really need to understand each market, what the costs are, the different types of talents that you can actually find in each market, and then the actual the way that each company or each country is set up from a tax perspective, because there are going to be different requirements in every country. So I think it's really a matter of researching, getting the most up-to-date information on salary bands, country-specific taxes, employer taxes, employee taxes. Often VCs have this data as a reference point, but I think it's up to each and every company to produce your own comparable figures. I also think important to utilize networks, speak to peer companies that have gone through what you've gone through already, and really just take best advice and best practice from investors, advisors, and other founders to really understand what it means to grow internationally or locally, particularly from that cost perspective.
Okay, amazing. And there is one thing that I wanted to ask you about as well, Brandon, which is basically right now there is like a big challenge in terms of like in terms of getting the right talent, right? Like it's no like surprise to anyone here who is like listening to us right now, but there is a huge talent shortage in the market. Obviously, with talent shortage, you'll have to prioritize as well, because well, it's not an open bar. You'll have to go and you have to kind of say, okay, I'm going to pick and choose which talents come first to my company and who am I going to hire first. That would obviously have some kind of like implications and consequences. Any kind of like elements on that?
Yeah, so I think, as you said, we're seeing, particularly in the UK, there's really stiff competition for technical roles, for sales roles, and this shortage in talent is certainly driven up costs for these roles. So I think, in the current environment, the one thing to definitely consider is to actually looking at other labor markets in order to fill those roles. So we're seeing, particularly amongst our client base, a real success in understanding international markets, and understanding what talent is actually available there. And really, in today's world, there's so many great platforms to be able to source talent in other areas and really understand what is available and what the cost thereof of getting that talent is. I think other things just to understand what we're seeing is with this concept of the Great Resignation. It's quite a different labor market at the moment. So employees are looking for different things than they used to, perhaps. So really, remote work has become a very big thing. So I think companies need to look at what their offering is. So really making it more attractable, for this new generation of workers and of employees that are coming and wanting a little bit more from their jobs and their life, to the old historic way that we used to look at employment. So we're seeing, particularly amongst our client base, that you're able to attract top talent by really looking at the job offering people flexibility, remote work, and really being able to understand these talent pools, where to find this talent. And I think what we've noticed is that you can really find talent that is of a very similar level, for example, in the UK, at a fifth of the cost if you go to the right lower cost jurisdictions. And we're finding that that sort of behavior is really helping companies. If they really put their mind to it, they can attract top talent at a much cheaper price at the same sort of level.
Okay, that's amazing. And quick question for you as well. It's in terms of like the global kind of like aspect. Some companies right now, based in Europe, based in the US, based in other areas in the world, they have effectively a shortage of talent. They are maybe looking for alternative ways to kind of like hire people in different countries, etc. When do you think a startup or scale up basically be able to know, and when do you think they will be ready to kind of like understand when the hiring of like going cross countries in terms of hiring is actually the right fit for them, and if they're actually ready for that as well from an infrastructure perspective?
My personal opinion is that COVID has really changed the way that companies behave, and I think it's really it's enabled the globalization of business to occur at a much faster pace. So
of course.
I do think it depends on how ambitious businesses want to be and what their objectives are. For some companies, maybe it doesn't make sense at the moment to have globally distributed workforces. But I think from what we've seen, particularly with the businesses that we help today, is that with the introduction of technology and the technological tools that can enable remote working, I think it's actually a much easier and less scary thing than businesses think to actually go globally. So,
oh, really?
Yeah. So, and we're seeing that absolutely, that you can run teams remotely in a much more controlled environment, and it can be done very successfully. So I think for me, it's firstly understanding there's two things. Number one is, do you want to go and expand into those new markets? And I think that decision will really catapult you to go and find a way to hire in those regions. But number two, there's a new model where you may not want to expand into international markets, but you can actually have workforce. You can actually place your workforce in these markets to really help retain talent and attract top talent by actually expanding the places that you're actually recruiting in.
Yeah, amazing. Quick question for you, Rafael. In terms of like the the kind of the trigger that companies, scale-ups would put in hiring full-time or hiring part-time employees, how do you balance that when you're a CEO or founder of a company?
Yeah, so we work with a lot of growth companies that go through different stages, right? And that means that just the numbers of employees that they have can change quite dramatically after each round. And so there's always this kind of question, which is, how do I make sure I bring the right people? Do I really need a lot of full-time employees, or should I use contractors? And obviously, we're a bit biased, obviously, because we are a platform where we provide contractors to those companies. But I would say that it makes sense for a company to have about 20 to 30% of the workforce in some form of contractors, independent contractors. And And there's a few good reasons for this. I think one, there's some type of jobs I think that are better filled with contractors. Every time you're doing something a bit creative, artistic almost, like the designers, the UX, and I think that's well known. Those people have quite a form of independent thinking. They don't necessarily want to be in a corporate structure with reporting lines and those kind of things. So that's obviously one area that's well recognized. The other area is simply when you have some projects, right? It could be a fundraise, it could be preparing for a transaction, it could be a very discrete project. Similarly, you can find people are very happy to run independently and not necessarily be in a kind of reporting structure. So that's, I think, one core reason. A second reason is, even if you're in a growth trajectory, you want to have some degree of flexibility to manage your cost base. And so, you want to have that workforce is a bit flexible, that can adjust when you have a lot more activity than you anticipate, or if the activity slows down for a quarter or two, you also want to be able to dial down. So that's, I think, a very good reason. And the third reason is simply that you can find some very senior people that you can't necessarily afford full-time, but you may be able to afford them on a part-time basis. And they can have a very positive impact on your organization because they bring the experience, the maturity, or perspective that you don't have. And I would say it's very beneficial to the rest of the company to have that perspective. And it doesn't need to be, 24/7. It could be just a few days, a week, or a month, and you benefit from, very senior people who've done this before, who've seen this before, that can mentor the rest of the organization. And I think it should be seen as a strength rather than a weakness to have those type of individuals in your organization.
It's amazing, and I really I like this kind of like part as well about like the seniority, because a lot of companies would sometimes hire, it's going to be a really kind of strategic hiring based on the roles that you want. You probably want to have, for something complex like an architecture, like an IT architect, maybe someone more senior, etc. So I like that kind of like balance between the different roles and being almost like strategic in like having to kind of like for each role know exactly which type of person you want to get, because there is no, at the end, no one fits it all. Back to you now, Brendan. When it comes to the hiring part, you want to, like, say you're a scale up, you just raised the Series A, you're based in London or elsewhere, sorry. You want to start you want to start right now hiring, a global team, just right. So you want to start hiring now a global team. Where do you start? Like, are there any kind of tools, toolkits, resources? Where do you get started as a CEO or founder?
I think firstly, it's important to understand that hiring a global team doesn't have to be burdensome, and it doesn't have to be expensive. In today's world, it can actually be done pretty easily and quickly. So for me, the most important thing is to actually find the right partner to work with. And I'd say somebody that's done it, that's been there, that understands the various complexities of global hiring and understands the local markets that you want to go into. I am a little bit biased, but our business helps companies expand into foreign markets, but it's really finding a model that works for you in terms of getting going. So there's various models. You could start by opening up your own statutory entities, which can be long and cumbersome. You could do a PEO model. We provide what we call an employer of record model, but there's really off-the-shelf models that allow you to hire individuals in foreign countries literally at the click of a button. So I think it's understanding what model works for you and then choosing that partner under that model. As I say, we would recommend, from a global hiring perspective, an EOR model, an employer of record model. It allows you to hire people around the world without actually opening up a statutory entity. And then it's important, I think, just to consider the communication tools, just to keep everybody on the same page and to engage your employees on a consistent basis. So communication, workflow management, KPIs, etc., just getting everybody on the same operational tool that you can really track and manage your global staff. And then I think, just lastly, there are a lot of great solutions out there that replicate what you might provide to your employees in your local market. So as an example, there are many businesses that will provide you equipment, sourcing, delivery, and installation anywhere in the world in 150 countries. You're able to source recruitment agencies on tech platforms that can find you the right talent in these places. You can engage, tools from a communication perspective, virtual rooms, et cetera, et cetera. So we've seen from our partnerships that we have, we really try to replicate what you do in your local market and make it feel normal. So I think those for me are the four main things to look at when looking to go global and hire globally.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Brendan. I'm mindful of the time, so we'll probably. I have one last question to ask you, but probably gonna have to be quick on this one. Before we open to the floor for Q&A, we have a 10 minutes Q&A session for our audience to be able to ask Raphael and Brendan really any question you would like. Big question about, of course, you work from home, you work as a distributed team, some people at the office, some people elsewhere. I mean, how do you keep the glue between these people? How do you keep all of them engaged? And, really feel free, Raphael or Brendan, if you want to answer that one, because this is something that I was quite trying to understand as well and try to also apply for, my own company and for a lot of different organizations that I speak to. So how do you keep the glue?
Sure, maybe I'll take a stab at it, but
yeah,
look, it's clearly an important priority for everyone. I mean, when you're on screen and remote, you always, by definition, feel a bit far away from the team or your other colleagues, workers, partners, and so on. Especially if everybody is remote, then nobody is in one location. That's even more complex. So I think it takes an extra effort to bond and be interested in the other person, because the risk is to become almost too transactional. You jump on the Zoom, talk about business, move on. So you have to think a little bit about that. On the other hand, if people have chosen a location where they're based, it clearly outweighs any other factors, and so you have to respect that, right? You have to respect that they've made that choice and that it works for them. I think the other point is to maybe connect on other topics than work. Just ask them how they're doing. Sometimes just call them and talk about something completely different. See if they're interested in having a little coffee chat or something, because if it becomes only work related, you start losing a little bit that connection. So that's, I think, what we see can help engage employees in a different level, and partners, because that's everyone.
Yeah,
Excellent.
obviously.
I'll give it a stab as well. I think for us, communication is critical. So just establishing guidelines for everybody to follow. I know in our organization, we make sure that we do Teams meetings with a lot of people in a town hall sort of environment, but then we also make sure that we do a lot of one-on-ones just to give people a sense, make it more personal. I think we've said it before, but there's wonderful time tracking, collaboration, and project management tools out there that can really enable asynchronous teams to work together. So we really utilize in our own organization, a lot of those tools. I think just getting everybody on the same page and aligning goals through these platforms really can make it much easier. But I think communication is critical.
Amazing. Well, I'm gonna open now to the floor for Q&A. So please feel free to ask any question you would like to Raphael or to Brendan. I'm monitoring the chat right now, and we can take it from there. We have more or less 7 minutes ish of Q&A. So, and super insightful, by the way, Brendan and Raphael. Really themes that are super seasonal right now for a lot of startups. I mean, hiring abroad, keeping the glue, which stuff to choose as well, which type of contracts, is it permanent, is it a contractor? A lot of super interesting topics. So really great insights. Feel free to ask us any questions, and in the meanwhile, while the audience warms up a little bit for the Q&A, I'm probably going to be asking you, Brendan, one question. So tell us a little bit more about like Playroll and how do you work?
Absolutely. So I think before the pandemic, this concept of remote work was there, but really, I think there was a lot of nervousness around whether it could actually, be successful. And obviously, when the pandemic came about, everybody went remote, and we really decided we were running a big business before Playroll, multiple subsidiaries around the world with many staff members in multiple jurisdictions, and we really figured out that if we had a platform that can enable companies to hire staff members at the click of a button in any country in the world within minutes, it would make a huge difference just from a global expansion perspective and also from a talent retention perspective. So what Playroll does is we facilitate the employment of employees anywhere around the world through our platform, and we allow it without the need for hiring a local entity. So that's our core product. We also enable the hiring of contractors. That's a product that's been launched this month. But we've particularly focused on full-time employment in all the jurisdictions that we've been operating in for over 20 years. And I think it really, from a talent retention perspective, from a global expansion perspective, and also from the idea that you don't have to have enormous statutory infrastructure, that's really where the area that we specialize in.
Okay, fantastic. Well, a big thank you, Brandon. And let's see if we have, so I've put also like a link on the chat right now for anyone who wants to book a complimentary session on hiring, global team with Playroll. There's the Playroll Calendly in there. And then if anyone wants to also book a complimentary session, a free advising session for the fundraising part, there will be as well the rechecks link in there. And Raphael, how is the fundraising part working on rechecks?
Sure. So for us, I mean, we have really several products or solutions, if you want, in our offering, but one of them is around fundraising and helping companies get to the next level. And so we've developed digital tools to reach out to investors very quickly, and they could do this through the platform and reach out to all the essentially institutional investors, Series A, Series B onward, and so on, even the debt side. So that's one. The other thing is built around this transaction capabilities. We've built a talent platform where we have about 2,700 advisors now. We call them advisors, but essentially they're independent contractors that we recruited and vetted, and they can essentially step in and be part of your team to facilitate either the preparation or the execution of transactions or projects related to those transactions. So that's the idea. And so that's why we're quite complementary with what Playroll does, because we help them before they get ready to hire. We help them when they want to hire. Also, if you want a part-time workforce to execute their plan.
That's amazing. Thank you very much, Raphael. Any type of stage for active?
I think really it's from Series A onwards.
Series A onwards, okay.
Yeah, when companies are getting to a point where they're starting to be a bit more institutionalized, that's where it makes sense to work with us. We do sometimes exceptionally some seeds, but it has to be of a certain size because it has to be interesting to the institutional community. Otherwise it's generally family and friends or some of the established seeding platforms that are better suited for that.
Amazing. Well, a big thank you. We have a time for one more question, maybe. So there's some people are saying hi on the chat. Hi, everyone, for who are listening. And so we have a time for one last question. I'm probably going to give it like another 10, 20 seconds to see if there's anyone who asks a question. Otherwise, we can wrap up. Okay, amazing. Well, I don't think that there are any questions out there. So big thank you, Raphael. And Redwan have a question. Okay, so go ahead, please. So Radwan from LinkedIn is listening to us on LinkedIn right now, and he has a question. Just waiting for him to pop up the question on the chat. Radwan, if you hear us, please do feel free to pop up the question on the chat so we can answer it. Thank you very much. And so the question is, what do you think about IPO and fundraising? And feel free to either Rafael or Brandon take the lead on that one. You choose, guys.
What do I think about IPO and fundraising? Well, I mean, to be frank, IPOs are a little bit on the back burner given the markets recently.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of plans, but obviously it's pulled. So I would think that that's a bit more complicated option.
Yeah.
It may reopen, but the markets are down a lot, and tech investors
Yeah.
have pulled out. So I would say today fundraising is really in the private markets, and even private markets are a little bit more complicated now. The bar is higher. So, but those things are cyclical, so you have to keep preparing for this and wait for the right window. But so I think right now I would say the focus is a bit more on private markets. If I understand the question, because
Yeah. I guess that was probably a choice.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, big thank you, both of you. Big thank you, Rafael, Brandon, for joining us today for this super insightful session, and hopefully we'll be doing another one soon.
Thanks a lot, Mehdi.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Mehdi. Take care.